Yeah, it probably started off as terrible insecurity and shyness and everything else. But again, it's all part of that sort of learning to be a survivor in life.
My guest today is Tim Moore, a man whose life reads like a course in entrepreneurship, but feels more like a story about character. You'll learn that his career spans 5 decades, multiple national organizations, millions made, lost, and made again. But what makes his story matter is not simply what he's built, but what he's become to build it.
That was scary. But I know one thing, I wasn't going to let it get to me. I had to survive.
Tim didn't arrive with the usual credentials. Failed grade 3, grade 12, at a 35% average at times. He was shy and sure of himself, shaped by a childhood where money was tight, encouragement was scarce, and work was not an option. He was once on a path to become a priest, then a teacher, but became a mover and one of Canada's most successful entrepreneurs. His first business began with a secondhand pickup truck, a tarp, a newspaper ad, and a willingness to do the work others avoided. From there, he built AMJ Campbell into Canada's largest national moving company. He built premier executive suites into Canada's largest extended stay accommodations provider. He started and invested in businesses across moving, real estate, mortgages, storage, hospitality, and more. But again, that's his resume. His story is much deeper.
Everybody I come in contact with is a potential employee, a potential partner. I would just have the luxury of observing people. You learn a lot about people just watching them.
What you're going to learn is he learned business from the ground up. He learned that a move is not just boxes and furniture. It's people trusting you with their lives at the moment of transition. People dealing with stress and fear and loss, hope and change. He learned that trucks and uniforms and language and manners and behavior are not small things. They are the business of doing business. They signal whether you respect the customer, your colleagues, your community, and yourself.
Just getting the right people on the bus is critical. People that have a strong interpersonal skills, great presentation.
In his book, How I Made It, Secrets of a Self-Millionaire, he talks about fear as a warrior emotion. He talks about humility as a superpower. He talks about never being as important as you think you are. He talks about the value of saying thank you, treating people properly, of hiring for character, sharing ownership, and building companies where ordinary people can become extraordinary.
It's necessary. You got to keep some balance. Interaction, talking to people, having fun with people, and doing crazy, stupid things.
His own lessons include being polite, never raising your voice, having good manners, thinking big but acting small, and treating customers with respect and kindness, and creating a culture of inclusiveness, hard work, respect, and friendship.
The one point shocked everybody. All about manners. Please, thank you. I'm grateful. I got a standing ovation.
And that is why this conversation matters. Because at a time when many people are asking how to succeed, where to move next on the chessboard, Tim Moore reminds us to ask a better question. Who do you have to become so success does not ruin you, fear does not stop you, failure does not define you, and ambition does not cost you your humanity?
It really is how you behave and how you treat people.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Thank you for listening to Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. If you can, please subscribe to the podcast. And ratings and reviews, well, they're always welcome and they're always appreciated.
Tim Moore, lovely to see you here today.
Thanks, Tony. Great to be here.
So before we talk about the companies, the money and the trucks, the buildings and the book, Tim Moore, How I Made It, talk to me about the young Tim Moore before you made it.
Yeah, I was brought up in a family of 6. My parents were actually quite strict. I was the eldest in the family, so I took a lot of the serious discipline. And then, of course, I went to high school in West End, Toronto. It was Michael Power High School, educated by Brazilian priests. Corporal punishment was in. Going from the high school, I ended up going to the seminary where I went to study to be a priest. I was there for 3 years, so the discipline carried on.
Just a little bit more about your dad, because, you mentioned the discipline, but obviously he instilled some incredible values in you. But how much did financial insecurity define the family in general and be your inner motivation to say, I never want to be in that position again?
My dad, unfortunately, always lived beyond his means. He was a great salesman. He wasn't a good business person. We had cars, we had cottages. We'd have bill collectors calling the home, requesting monies. Had his business, and after 30 years, he went bankrupt not once, but twice. All our siblings, we became a little paranoid when it came to money because of that. We all grew up saying, we don't want to have debt. We don't want to live beyond our means. So to this day, I would say that it still affects us. You learn from that, change from that.
I want to talk a bit about this seminary because you talk about the school and the discipline that carried on in the corporal punishment, but you spent 3 years studying to become a priest. So what did you find within that school system beyond the beatings that made you say this could be a vocation for you?
Well, I started in a class of about 68 seminarians. Being there the 3 years, at the end, there were only 5 left. The bonding was amazing. Every single morning, we're up at 5 o'clock in the chapel for an hour, 3 hours a day praying. But we played sports together. We bonded. We got close. I think assisted in building my character and trying to make me a better person.
In those days, the oldest son would go into the seminary, you leave it, and your parents stopped talking to you for 3 years.
I met this girl from Colorado, and she was belonged to the Church of Christ, a very strict religion. So religion brought us together. I left the seminary. My parents really didn't talk to me for a couple of years. Maybe it was an embarrassment for them, but it's all part of life.
I want to now move the story forward because there's so much to cover. Your first moving business begins with a $2,000 secondhand pickup truck and a tarp.
I left the seminary. I went up to Sudbury, Ontario, taught for 2 years, went back and actually got an honor degree from Waterloo, went to McGill to do graduate studies, ran out of money partway through the year, and I was broke. I had nothing. It wasn't my idea. I had this idea from a fellow that I was talking to that had a truck in Ontario, and he did small moves. I said, I think I'm going to do the same thing. Traded my car in for a small pickup truck and put sides on it, put a tarp on top, and I started to advertise student moving. And I made more money in 2 days working on the trucks than I had a week of teaching. So the monetary aspect I liked. I became a truck driver for 7 years. I drove a truck. But I started from nothing, and I started slowly built over the years.
You always see lessons. Talk to me about the broom lady story, because I think that's one of the lessons that clearly swept you away and continues to be part of your DNA.
The very first week in the movie business, this woman called me up and she said, look, I have 7 or 8 boxes to move. How much would it cost me? So I figured, well, I was charging $7 an hour. I said, I'll do it in an hour, so I'll charge you $7. And remember, I just got my truck, built up about 8 feet, and I go downtown Montreal. I see the building. I have to go around to the back of the building. There was an attendant there. I said, I have to go to this apartment in this building. He says, well, you go underground about 150 feet. Put it in gear. Under I go. Totally forgetting that I got a truck and not a car. Smashed the top of the garage. Did damage to my truck. Did damage to the bars. My tarp was ripped. Anyway, so I got over that and I walked in and went upstairs and I said, can you show me everything that's going? And she had about 2 complete rooms of furniture. And I said, oh, I thought you only had 7 or 8 boxes. She says, no, everything's going. I was doing it by myself. Hey, there was even a queen size bed. I carried that out by myself. And it took me maybe 2 hours to load the truck. On the way to destination, I said, look, I'm going to have to charge you more than $7. And she got really cruel and mean with me and started yelling. She says, you told me $7. You better stick to that price. Remember, I just got out of the seminary. I was really a nice guy. And so I said, okay. So anyway, I did the move. Took approximately 5.5 hours. I learned I'm not going to do that again. The irony is she called me within about 2 or 3 months. And she says, Tim, I need you to move me again. I'm going to go travel to Europe. I need my goods sent to my parents' place. I said, okay, my rate now is $9 an hour. You have to pay by the hour. So I did the move on a Friday. On the Saturday night, she called me and says, you forgot to move my broom. I said, well, where was your broom? She said it was behind the door. I said, well, you were there. You had just as much responsibility to make sure the broom got out as I did. Again, she turned on me. I'm going to report you to the Montreal Star, the Better Business Bureau, and then click, she hung up on me. Now, I didn't have a license at the time, so I was nervous that she was going to report me. So I drove across town and I picked up her broom. Years later, many years later, I told that story to a group of about 400 or 500 corporate people. I remember Eddie Shack was our guest speaker that night. About 2 weeks before we had the event, I heard that Eddie Shack was speaking up in Northern Ontario, and his language was very off color. There were women, there were young children there. So I told his agents, I said, look, tell Eddie, just keep the language down. Well, Eddie Shack got up and he was quite explicit in terms of where that woman could put her broom.
You could call moving a transactional relationship. I'm picking up your stuff and I'm moving it somewhere. You saw it much more transformational. You said there's a psychological trauma that comes with moving. People aren't just handing over furniture, they're handing over memories. How did that impact how you built your business, the people you recruited, and sort of the values that you tried to embody every time you move somebody?
Moving is the third most traumatic event of one's life. So we deal with the psychological side, and you got to be sensitive to people. I mean, it's funny being in the moving business because I used to say, did I like moving furniture day in and day out? No, I didn't. But I really like dealing with people, and I like making money. That just gave me a thrill. But the moving business is a very difficult business.
You grew this business, market leader, over 100 people in head office, trucks on the road, people's in uniforms, cruising customers' homes. And so there's another story we talked about where you heard that 2 of your drivers weren't embodying the values that you grew up with. We talked about them earlier, politeness and respect for people. How do you deal with that as you're starting to scale the business? What do you do when somebody decides that your values are your values and not necessarily how they need to behave?
We had about 80,000 square foot facilities, and we had an awful lot of drivers. And drivers tend to be a different breed, but there were rules. There's no swearing around the place because you never know where the customers are. This one particular time, I remember these people were in a grocery store, and they had these 2 movers in front of them going through the cash, and they were swearing. Language was very inappropriate, and they were being very unprofessional. And then these people that I knew saw the 2 guys go out on the outside, jump into an AMJ Campbell truck. And then he called me. And he said, Tim, just thought you'd like to know about your movers. And I tracked that truck down. I called the guys in, and I said, guys, look, what you do after hours is your business. But when you're on our trucks and you got our uniforms on, we expect you to be highly professional. That reminds me when I got my honorary doctorate degree from St. Mary's, and I hit on 5 key points. I talked about interpersonal skills, having balanced your life. And the one point that I brought up shocked everybody. And it was all about manners. Please, thank you. I'm grateful. And the students, I got a standing ovation.
I look around sometimes at young people and I go, this interpersonal skills, not just manners, looking people in the eye, shaking hands, having conversations, seems to be moving to more of the screen and the texting. How's that going to impact our society and our humanity going forward?
Well, I think it's much more impersonal because social media has changed everything. But I think we got to go back. We got to have the balance in our lives. You need the social interaction. Look, we're all on computers today. I mean, it's necessary, but you got to keep some balance. Interaction, talking to people, and having fun with people, and doing crazy, stupid things. Part of life and part of business.
You seem to be like years ahead of your time, though. To me, that's emotional intelligence. That's that I'm getting somebody that has a heart that roars versus just thinking they're the smartest person in the room or happen to be very good at task. How did you hire for that? Because that doesn't come off a resume.
Some things perhaps I'm not quite as strong in. But one thing I did very well was hiring the right people. I never put an ad in the paper. I never advertised because everybody I come in contact with is a potential employee, a potential partner. And I would just have the luxury of observing people for a week, a month, a few months. And you learn a lot about people just watching them. And then, of course, if I was that impressed, then I'd go after them. Getting the right people on the bus is critical. strong interpersonal skills, great presentation, people that get along with their colleagues well, people that have a love of life and have smiles on their face, people who have a positive mental attitude. Clint Giffen, who was recommended to me in Halifax, I had to get some glasses. So a friend of mine said, look, you got to go to Braddock Optical and see Clint Giffen. So I go to Braddock Optical, and this guy comes out shaking my hand with a smile on his face, with lots of enthusiasm. And I buy the glasses. And then I went back to get the glasses, and he was the same way. Just knocked me out. When I went to pay the bill, I said, Clint, I think you're in the wrong profession. Love to sit down and chat with you. 3 months later, I hired him and I gave him an option on some shares. 25 years later, he did very well financially. So there's so many stories like that. I focused in another area. That was the receptionist in a couple of major centers. One particular situation in Toronto, Suzanne La Rochelle at the time, she was so good. She had all the skills. She was French-Canadian. She had strong interpersonal skills. She had a smile on her face. And I said to the girl doing the hiring, I said, get her before she gets home. When I started Premium Suites, I brought her into the business. And she's run it for 25 years.
It's like you had to share the pie. People talk about calling seats on the bus, but you're saying, I want you to own a piece of the bus. So you call fear a warrior emotion. So when you bought AMJ Campbell, you went all in. You sold your house, you moved your family, maxed out line of credit, a bank manager telling you to find another bank. I mean, this doesn't sound like the kid that never wanted to have uncertainty under their feet. This is the risk and reward of a warrior. So how did you come to terms with the tension of going, I might be putting my family, my personal situation in the same shifting sand that my dad had us in?
I think as business people, when you're in business, you have to learn to be a survivor. And when that banker told me, suggested to go look for another bank, and I just paid out $400,000 to buy out my partner, that was scary. But I know one thing, I wasn't going to let it get to me. I had to survive.
Lots more to come. Tim shares some of the true lessons he's learned over the years. And you might be surprised to know it's less about numbers and more about people. And speaking of people, Kim Mason from RBC, someone with an extraordinary brain and a roaring heart, joins the show and shares one of her stories about working with Tim, plus my 3 takeaways. Canada's economy wasn't built in boardrooms. It was built by people with an idea that they made happen. They took a risk, they opened a door, they signed a lease, they hired someone. They bought equipment before the orders came in. That is the true business of doing business. And today, it's harder than ever. Customers want more. Costs keep climbing. Technology keeps changing. And almost every owner is asking the same question. How do I keep moving forward? Well, that's where RBC Commercial Banking comes in. RBC supports Canadian businesses with a dedicated relationship manager, someone who has specialized industry expertise and can put together tailored financing, cash management, payment solutions, and trade and global banking support. Advice, ideas, and solutions to help companies manage today while building their tomorrow. We can't forget that behind every business is more than a balance sheet. There are jobs that help support families that support communities, and of course, ideas and ambition. When Canadian business succeeds, Canada succeeds. And that's why it matters to you, to me, and to RBC.
I take a lot of pride in one thing. Yes, I've done well. Yes, I've achieved a lot. I have a lot of successes in life. But the nice thing is I don't think I'm any different when I was in the seminary or when I started my pickup truck. I'm here to be professional in business, treat everybody the same, and have a lot of fun in life, and surround yourself with really good people. One of my sons said a little while back, he said, Dad, I don't like people that aren't nice. I said, well, I don't either, but you know what? You got to deal with them. You got to work with everybody.
My guest today is Tim Moore. He's written this extraordinary book, How I Made It, Secrets of a Self-Made Multimillionaire. I've gotten to know Tim, and I'll let you in on a secret. He leads with his heart. And I think that matters above all. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Tim, when I read the book at the beginning, this shy kid doesn't get through grade 3, he's not exactly what I call a stellar student, but you built a personal brand with the cars, the clothes, the boots, the confidence and the swagger. And I love the fact you admit that part of it was just covering up your shyness.
Yeah, it probably started off as terrible insecurity and shyness and everything else. But again, it's all part of that sort of learning to be a survivor in life. Everything I did in every company I started has its own story. One thing I always thrived on was change and doing things different. You had to be different from everybody else. I can just talk about the moving company, which I was in for 30 years. And we did so many things that were different. So many things were outside the box. The AMJ, we put the A in front to get in front of the yellow pages. But everything we did, I remember one of the very first moves, the first month in the business, everybody was paid by the hour. 3 guys in a truck went to Ottawa. They loaded, went to Ottawa, unloaded, came back, put in almost 40 hours of work. Now, I had the experience of knowing how long it takes to load and unload and so on and so forth. So I said, this isn't going to work. I can't pay these people, this much money. So I started putting people on contract. So it had not been done in the industry at a local level at all. I made independent business people out of these drivers. And now they made more money, but they also had to be more accountable. And the next thing you know, 2 years later, other movers are doing the same thing. Women, we certainly at one point in time, we had more women in more senior positions in the trucking industry than any other mover in Canada. And the trucking industry was always a male-dominated type of industry. So it was always the best person for the job. But everything we did was different. I had the drivers wear ties. They didn't like wearing ties, but I convinced them to do it. And so it doesn't make a good mover, but perception is reality. And then, of course, the thing that was kind of unexpected is as a moving company, we started to expand in different cities. Before you knew it, we were in 10, 15, 20 cities. So we put the van lines on the end. And so that turned out to be our biggest selling feature. That's why I took it from the moving over to the suites business. So people love the idea. You deal with this here and you deal with this there. And so there's some continuity. I want to make sure that people had fun. If you're in a stressful business, which the moving business is, you have to have fun. And believe me, there were so many different things we did. And one of the things I remember, somebody was complaining about how people were standing at each other's desks at our head office. And they were all talking. And I said, look, I think that's a great idea. Because people were bonding, people were talking, people were socializing, they were communicating. And with all the key people in the country, we had virtually no turnover for 20 years. That says a lot to me. Yes, there were partners, they had a financial interest, but we became very close. And that carried into all the other businesses.
Tell me about the home life, because I know that when we met, you were more interested in talking about your beautiful wife, family, and Nova Scotia and the sense of community that you've created. So talk to me about that side, because someone as busy as you and has put so much into building so many businesses very often get to your age and go, I don't even know who my family is because I wasn't around for them.
As I reflect back, the first 35 years in the business, I literally worked 7 days a week. I lived and breathed customer service. I lived and breathed my companies. So you lose some family connection. Although today I'm as close to my boys and my wife as any person could possibly be in life. So I'm kind of blessed that way, that I've always had that support. I would never be where I am today if it wasn't for my wife. Talk about the wars in business and trying to survive. But I always had a place to come back to where my wife would listen to everything. And I would tell her everything, all the good, bad, and the ugly. So to this day, after being together over 48 years, we're as close now than we've ever been. We moved to Chester, Nova Scotia, and this did become a sanctuary. Did become a place where I could come and be quiet and spend time with my kids and my wife. And that's why in the year 2000, I worked so hard. I said, all I want to do is spend time with my family. That's why I exited and sold the moving company.
Has retirement ever lasted more than 3 days with you?
My banker said to me a year ago, he says, "Boy, I'm impressed with you. You've done a good job. You haven't bought anything in the last year." So I still have it in my system. What can I build now? What can I take now and build?
And part of the reason I think you wrote this book is to talk to the next generation. You love talking to students. What do you think they need? As fast as the world is changing, what are the lessons of life that stand the test of time?
Well, I think you have to have balance in your life. Taking care of your mind, your body, your soul. Take care of yourself. I work out at least 3 to 5 times a week. How you treat people is really, really important, and get along with people. And, you should treat everybody with dignity and respect. Certainly, if you've got your own business, my style has always been the same.
What are the other things you're grateful for as we get to this point in our career where we're more reflective? What are the things you look and say, that was a life lived well?
I'm blessed to have met so many good people. And certainly I've opened the door and created a lot of millionaires in Canada. I think for the most part, they really appreciate it. All I could say to them is, look, I appreciate that. But you know what? All I did was open the door. You made it happen. You had the work ethic. You had the interpersonal skills. You're the one that made the sacrifices. To have such a strong family connection after all these years is so amazing, because there's so much love and affection and respect among the family and close friends that, I'm extremely blessed.
Did your parents ever see your success? Did they live long enough that what they deemed to be a failure, you leaving the seminary, and probably rolled their eyes a bit with the pickup truck and the tarp? Did they ever realize that the kid they raised and the kid that sort of battled some ways in school has become such and I don't even mean an economic success, I would say an emotional success?
Yeah. Well, my mother died at 63 years old of lung cancer. She smoked at least 3-4 packs a day. I had her working at the moving company at AMJ Campbell. They all called her mother there. But my dad died several years ago, and he used to come into the moving company, and I always gave him an office to work at, and he was always trying to make a living. When he was 78 years old, he never ever stopped working. Great human being, a great salesperson, but never really made it financially, and partly because he lived beyond his means a lot of his life. So, but I always invited him into the office, so he saw the success. He saw our moving company. So my dad was always there.
Yeah, the title of your book is How I Made It, The Secrets of a Self-Millionaire. And it's obviously some great lessons in life about the business of doing business. Of all the things we've talked about today, what is the one character of this great character, Tim Moore, that you'd say, I want to be remembered for?
It really is how you behave and how you treat people. I learned sort of being in the seminary. I was such a nice guy. And then I get out in the real world, in the trucking business. I realize it's not such a good world out there a lot of the time. So you can't always be nice. You have to learn how to survive. But at the end of the day, being a gentleman, being respectful. Profit magazine had me on their cover once and said, Mr. Nice Guy. Yes, I'm nice, but I'm also can be very tough. So you have to have the other side to you.
I think you're aware that RBC sponsors my podcast. I know you've done a lot of work with RBC over the years. Kim Mason was actually the one that said, you've got to have Tim on your podcast. He's one of my favorite people in the world.
Oh, she's sweet.
Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Kim.
She was president for RBC for Atlantic Canada, and she was just a dynamo. She really put RBC on the map in Atlantic Canada. She was liked and respected by everybody. When she was leaving, they decided to roast her. Arthritis Society decided to roast her. So she asked myself and 2 other lawyer friends to roast her. Well, that was one of the most difficult things I ever had to do in my life. How do you roast somebody that is so perfect in so many ways? She's very genuine. And when I was going through that disaster where I lost $1.5 million, she'd say to me, I was worrying about the bank. I felt bad for the bank because nobody had ever invested in me and lost money. And the bank was on the hook for upwards of $12 million. And she's saying to me, well, I got your back. that says something about her character.
Tim, I always end my conversations with my 3 takeaways, and there's so many I love about it. But the first one is a great lesson of life is you see a silver lining everywhere. You go into any situation. I love what you said. Sometimes I just observe people, and over time, if I like their smile and their personality, that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in their resume or their credentials. I'm interested in who they are as a human being. And I think we need to do more of that. We need to look away from our screens. We need to look at each other. We need to get face to face. So I think it's a beautiful part of you. I love the second thing is that you have to be different. I think we're so locked into the status quo. I think a lot of people are nervous to even step out of it because the world's changing so fast and it's almost impossible to digest how quickly things are moving. But the idea that we have to be different, we have to change, we have to bring fun in the office. Maybe have our moving drivers wear a tie because it signals that we care. And I think it's not different to be different, but it's different to be distinct, to be unique, to be appreciated. Yes. And I think that's an incredible lesson in life. And then the last thing is I can't begin to properly package how successful you are as a business person. But I asked you to unpack who you are. I want to be remembered as being a gentleman. And I think that is the greatest legacy in life is I want to be remembered for who I am, not what I did. And who you are is one hell of a wonderful person. So I have to go along with just about everybody else in the world and say, I know you're tough at times, but more than anything else, Tim Moore is one hell of a nice guy. So I really appreciate you joining me on Chatter That Matters.
Tony, I appreciate that. It was a pleasure.
Joining me now is Kim Mason. She's the Executive Vice President and Head of Private Banking for RBC. If there's 2 words to describe Kim Mason, for me, they would be possibility and positivity. And for those of you who aren't familiar, private banking isn't your everyday branch experience. This is a side of RBC that works with high net worth individuals, families, and family offices. Kim, welcome to Chatter That Matters. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
You look terrific.
Well, so do you. Thank you.
You are so highly regarded, not only within the bank, but clients. Tim Moore is a great example. School teacher in Sudbury, borrowed $2,000 for a truck, built one of the largest moving companies in Canada. And he talks about how Kim Mason had my back. We're not just there when things are moving well. We're there for you always. That has to be one of the most rewarding parts of your job is when you're no longer a banker talking just risk and reward. You become bedrock, a keystone. You're not only giving them a sense of financial security, but some emotional certainty, especially at tough times. They speak of you as a friend. They speak of you as somebody that matters to them, as opposed to, you matter to me because I needed a loan.
First of all, that's a huge compliment. Thank you, Tony. It comes down to care. And I genuinely care. I'm genuinely invested in our clients. And Tim, of all people, Tim certainly saw the banker in me because, Tim and I had a relationship. He wrote about it in his book, actually, but it was not a happy time for him because it involved a court case. And Tim, for me, is a great example of an entrepreneur who is incredibly creative, has never forgotten, I don't think, a single client that he served. So also very, very kind-hearted. There are those clients that you help along the way that then you become invested in how the future continues to unfold for them. Tim is one of those clients for me. I was fortunate to meet his sons, his daughter-in-law, his beautiful wife. He certainly holds a special place in my memories from Atlantic and with RBC.
Kim, when people talk about you, they talk about you with such love. I only hope I evoke half the feeling with the people in my life that you do that surround your life. And here's for the next 40 years at RBC.
I appreciate just what a kind and genuine person you are. And I listen to your podcast and I think I've shared with you what my favorite one was that I listened to that you did. I thank you so much.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.